You know, we are truly in a very dark timeline when it turns out that TikTokers are doing heavy lifting that the police aren't doing. Now, I say heavy lifting because I think TikTok sometimes gets in the way of active investigations. People throw out conspiracy theories. It becomes very messy very quickly. On the other hand, there are times where people on TikTok are doing the heavy lifting that it seems like the police either doesn't want to do, can't do, insert excuse. I've been keeping tabs on the whole Celeste story with David because I had a feeling, and a lot of people on TikTok also feel that way, that this is going to go absolutely nowhere. Now, I have to say, in this particular case, I do think that social media attention helps because it keeps a level of pressure on the police. If nobody were talking about this on social media, I think this would have already kind of dissipated, because if you actually look for articles about all of this, there aren't that many. And upon my research, because I saw TikToks, I wanted to see if anything was published to confirm, deny, whatever. A lot of the publications that are posting about this are on Facebook, which isn't a publication, but they're posts, I guess. They're on TMZ, and they're on, who else? The Hindustan Times, I think it was. And I was just kind of like, this is random. It's also very weird because I don't really know who really checks on TMZ anymore. I don't really, but they did pop up on my feed. Regardless, it's interesting that TMZ is posting about it, and yet so many other publications, newspapers, online reporting is silent. Anyway, let us go over the things that I've found recently that I think are interesting or that put more question marks, which really this entire case is a question mark, right? So one thing that has gone viral on TikTok is in relation to Celeste's family and the fact that they made a number of 911 calls. Now, I'm going to show you a TikTok that discusses this more in depth, but I did want to read a little bit from the LA Times since they actually wrote something about it. Before she was found dead in David's Tesla, Celeste Rivas' mysterious disappearance distressed family. So I'm skipping parts of this that we've already discussed, but it'll be linked down below if you want to read the full article. So it says, according to Riverside County Sheriff's Department records, Celeste was reported missing 3 times by her family in 3 incidents that occurred in early 2024 and sparked multiple calls with local police. Her mother made emotional pleas on Facebook for her to come home. Neighbors saw missing posts on local streets. Her family sought video surveillance from their neighborhood that could yield clues. She usually returned home to Lake Elsinore and blended back into her life as a middle schooler. Yeah, so then it goes on to say that Celeste had run away before, but she always came back. And this is something we've already discussed a little bit, that it seemed like there was a pattern of her running away and coming back. I'm assuming that's what some of the 911 calls were about, but like I said, the TikTok will explain more about that. So it's also important to note that neighbors said the family posted flyers of Celeste around the neighborhood, hoping to spread the word that someone would have information as to her whereabouts, and this is in reference to all the times she disappeared, right? And I think that this is an important thing to note, because if you've been on social media, actually, not so long ago, internet investigators were theorizing or putting out there the fact that David was paying off Celeste's family, and people were painting Celeste's family as complicit, which is something I never reported on because, I mean, it was all just made up shit anyway. There was no proof that that was the case. But aside from that, that's a very heavy allegation to put out there, that the family is basically trafficking or selling off their child, their minor child, to an adult. That's a very heavy accusation, but that was going around. That's also why I wanted to bring some attention to the phone records, because it really does not seem to me like the family was just letting her do whatever. It looks like there was quite a bit of interaction with the police. Now, people are theorizing that all the calls to 911 were basically just problems within the household, so another way to make Celeste's family look guilty. And there's no evidence that there were problems in the household to the extent that you have to call 911. Again, I don't know them, I'm not defending them, but I'm saying we can't just throw whatever out there and just say that's the truth. As a quick asterisk to that, I do think something was going on in the home, because typically kids don't just run away to run away. So it's possible that there was upheaval in the home, but again, we need to talk about this in levels, right? Because it's one thing to have a kid who does not get along with their parents for whatever reason and then runs away. It's a very different thing to have a kid who is in a toxic household, an abusive household, whatever the case may be. Those are two very different scenarios amidst many multiple scenarios, right? So I don't want to put any idea out there because I have no idea. There is nothing that's indicating what could have been going on within the household.
David and Celeste update, Celeste Rivas Hernandez update. The 911 call history from which Celeste's family was calling 911 multiple times throughout the year was released. Now, it's unclear how many of these times actually had anything to do with Celeste, but the amount of times that they were called is actually insane. I want to show you this because other than this, there haven't been any updates really about David, other than it has come out that he transferred the home to his mother's name and that he hired counsel who has represented very high profile people in Hollywood such as Kanye West. So let's go ahead and get into this call log that allegedly was coming from Celeste Hernandez Rivas' home. It features calls ranging from November of 2020 all the way to September of 2025. Let's get into it. So as we can see on this report, it says Riverside County Sheriff's Department Data Warehouse Report, and it shows the incident dates, and right over here it says the nature of the call. That's where it has a code, and that code actually tells you why the call was made. So if you want to screenshot this so you can look at it for yourself. And then that same person provided us with the call type / nature of the call, code, and meaning. If you want to screenshot this as well, that way you can take a look at the call log and then piece it together with the code meaning. So if we go back to the call log, a lot of these are FUs, meaning follow-up investigations, and they are follow-up investigations to the MNCIMI, meaning a minor crime incident. So let's go down the list. On November 17, 2020, a call was made for the fraudulent use of a credit card. The next two incidents, being August 18, 2021 and January 20, 2022, were for 911 missed dials or hangups. Next, on February 15, 2024, which wasn't this literally around the time that she went missing, they made a call for a minor crime incident, and then they followed up on the 15th and the 16th, and again on the 17th of 2024, they were doing follow-up calls. She was also reported missing in April of 2024, and we can see a call on April 1st, April 2nd, April 5th, April 11th, April 19th, April 20th, April 27th. Now, the majority of the ones in April are for a minor crime incident and follow-up calls, but the one at the end of April, the SCIRC, is for suspicious circumstances. Now, I know the codes do vary per state. This might be a little bit off. So of course, always go out and do your own research if you actually want to get very detailed and to the bottom of this. I'm trying to give you the best information that I can, but I know that everything on the internet is not always accurate. It looks like the last calls on this report were made on September of 2025. We have September 9th, September 10th, September 12th, September 19th, again on the 19th, the 22nd, and on the 29th. The first two were follow-up calls. The PC 594 says that it was for vandalism, which what was going on there? The next one was a follow-up investigation, follow-up investigation, follow-up investigation, and I'm reading the September ones. And then the final call on September 29, 2025 was for a general disturbance, which could be like a noise complaint, anything really. Now, I do want to stress that this is alleged. The person who requested this and uploaded it claims that these are the law enforcement call logs coming from Celeste Rivas Hernandez home, but it is the internet. There is always a chance that these could have been fabricated. I feel like it does give a little bit of insight. A lot of people are saying that this call log pretty much shows the kind of environment that Celeste was growing up in. It was very toxic, unhealthy, unstable, and just full of chaos, and overall not a good place for a kid to be in. I don't think I've called the police for anything literally ever that I can remember off the top of my head. So for these many calls to have been made in such a short span amount of time, something was clearly going on in her home. It has now been over a month since Celeste was found, and there have been no suspects named, no arrests, nothing, and I don't know what they're doing, but I hope that they're getting this handled.
So this is interesting because it, again, reframes the family not as complicit, but actually trying to get a hold of the authorities. It also shows the authorities allegedly doing these follow-ups, which means that they were at some point at least more involved than they appear to be now. I thought that was important also because there are so many aspects of this case that are nebulous or unexplained and unclear, and part of that was Celeste's relationship with her family, especially with the running away. A lot of people were coming up with theories as to why she was running away. So this at least contextualizes a little bit in the sense that they were looking for her. They weren't just like, okay, bye. So in another interesting development, so remember how David, the house that he was living in, was not his house? So it says, David's former landlord takes investigation into death of Celeste Rivas into his own hands with LAPD silent. Now, this is actually something I support because, and we'll get more into it as the article goes on, but it seems like he's hired a PI, and I don't think it's necessarily because he doesn't think the police is doing a good job, though it might very well be that, but to get his own answers, because if it was his property, I don't know what that means necessarily legally about things that happened there, blah, 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 but still it clearly means that this is not working in whatever way. And I think the whatever way is that we're not getting answers, and it doesn't seem like people are actively looking. Actually, one thing I will mention is on TikTok, I've been reading some of the comments, and this is why I don't spend time on TikTok unless it's for research purposes, because I just can't open comment sections. I've realized this. But anyway, in the comment sections, there are people actively complaining that this news story is unfolding too slowly and they don't have the attention span for it. Like, they're actually talking about this murder case as if it's a show that takes 8 years between each season. Like, truly, this is not entertainment. It might be entertaining to find out about true crime, but again, we need to have our feet on the ground and remember that people are dying, people are assaulted. Like, we are talking about real people, and I think like some people are losing the plot on that one. So it says, the owner of a Hollywood Hills mansion raided by police probing the death of a teenager linked to David has hired a private investigator after weeks without answers from police. So then it goes on to give us a bit of a summary of the case, which I don't really think we need at this point. On September 17th, LAPD homicide detectives raided the $4.1 million home where Burke, aka David, had been staying. Officials confirmed the search was linked to Rivas' death and said several items of evidence were collected. Since the raid, no arrests have been made, no suspects publicly named, and a cause of death for Celeste has not yet been determined. I don't know how to pronounce his name, so I'm not going to. Who owns the mansion where David had been living is desperate for answers. He told the Daily Mail he's only had limited contact with police and is concerned about what role, if any, his home may have played in Celeste's death. Determined to find the truth, he hired a private investigator to review surveillance footage and interview potential witnesses to determine whether Celeste ever stayed at the home, and if so, when she was last seen there. And this I thought was almost kind of funny because there were cameras on the house, so I feel like that would have been a very quick way to know that she has been in the home. And I don't know if David streamed from elsewhere, but if he was streaming from his house, she's been on his streams, so I think the obvious answer is yes, but I am glad that a PI is being brought into this because honestly, it really does seem like we're coming to a standstill, and goes back to what I was saying earlier, that I think this is one of the ways in which social media can be helpful because it keeps the pressure on to get the answers. This is a quote from the landlord saying, I have a private investigator gathering information because my family and I want to understand what may or may not have happened in or around a home that is very special to us. He also said, we're not interfering with the LAPD's investigation. We're simply seeking answers I fear may not be communicated to us unless we use a licensed investigator. So then it goes on to talk about how David has retained a top Hollywood attorney, which was Harvey Weinstein's attorney. So listen, people can look at that as some kind of quote unquote admission of guilt, which I don't think it's an admission of guilt. But at the same time, you know, a lawyer that's associated with that type of criminal usually makes people question why this lawyer specifically. And granted, he may just be a top lawyer and that's why he chose him, or it might be that there are more things in common than we know. Another thing in terms of what the LAPD has confirmed, it says that at this time, the LAPD says it's unsure if there is any criminal culpability beyond the concealment of her body. And this is another thing that people are coming up with. and this is potentially one of the more realistic things, is there are a lot of theories that Celeste actually OD'd or something happened to her that was not David's doing, and he simply decided to hide the body, which doesn't make all that much sense to me, because realistically, by concealing the body, you're making yourself look more guilty than just calling 911 and saying what happened. And sure, people might doubt you, but you called immediately, right? I don't know what he thought was going to happen with concealing the body, like nobody would just ever find it. Anyway, on top of this, there was a theory circulating on TikTok, which I personally didn't really want to give a level of credence to because there was no evidence to suggest that that was a valid theory. And that theory was that David's manager has something to do with Celeste's death. And while it's a possibility, I just don't think there's anything credible pointing to that right now. So if there's evidence that pops up of that, okay, sure. But as of right now, I don't even think we know anything about David's manager. Like, I remember that he was renting the house for David, but other than that, I haven't seen footage. I haven't seen any interviews or quotes from him. I haven't seen anything that would say, yes, this is credible beyond, what some randos on TikTok came up with. So if that is the case, we'll discuss that when evidence comes out. But until any evidence comes out, I really don't think it's helpful at all, the same way that blaming her family has not been helpful at all, especially now that we've seen that they were calling the police and they were trying to in some way solve the situation at hand. You guys can let me know what you think in the comments down below. An additional thing to be noted is that people are discussing David's assets, his home, so on and so forth, and that's been an element of contention as well, because people have been wondering, okay, why is David giving up ownership basically of his homes? And here's a TikTok that explains more about that.
Alright guys, so we have a new update regarding 14-year-old Celeste, or Celeste Rivas Hernandez, and we also do have some new updates on David himself. This video is more so going to be like an explainer video because I want to break down every single thing that's going on. So bear with me and let's get right into it. So here's what's raising major red flags for everyone. As reported by TMZ, David is making some real estate moves as cops investigate the death of 14-year-old Celeste Rivas, whose decomposing corpse was found in his Tesla. He transferred 2 of his Texas homes to his mother. According to new legal documents obtained by TMZ, the singer transferred the deeds to 2 Houston area residences he owns under a trust to his mom. David made the changes on September the 18th and September the 22nd, and the 18th was the same day cops were called to one of his homes for a swatting incident. The caller, who was apparently using a device to mask their voice, falsely reported a shooting and a dead female victim. In high-profile investigations, it's very common for suspects, especially celebrities, to shift assets ahead of possible charges. Because if prosecutors connect those assets to a crime, the government can seize them. Now, even if they can't prove David killed Miss Celeste or Celeste or physically placed her body there, that doesn't clear him. The fact that her body was found in his car opens the door for multiple felonies. We have tampering with evidence, moving or cleaning anything in the trunk, accessory after the fact, which means helping cover up the crime or hide someone else's involvement, abuse of a corpse or improper disposal, meaning concealing a body instead of reporting it, or obstruction of justice, which is giving false statements or delaying cooperation. And yes, the car itself can also be seized through civil forfeiture. Prosecutors use these charges all the time when a murder conviction is harder to prove. But post-crime, which means after crime actions, show clear involvement. Now, to add the disturbing context, Ms. Rivas was reportedly a minor around 14 or 15 traveling from Lake Elsinore to Hollywood to see him. And if there is any evidence of a sexual relationship, David could also face statutory rape, unlawful sexual intercourse with a minor, lewd acts with a minor, sexual abuse of a minor, child molestation, and sexual assault. These are all serious felony charges. Now, let's include the fact because she was a minor and considered a runaway, any supposed consent doesn't matter legally. She couldn't give it because she was underage. If evidence shows that he transported her across city or state lines for that relationship, it could escalate to transporting a minor for sexual purposes or even federal trafficking charges, depending on what's uncovered. So, between asset transfers, the body in his vehicle, and the potential relationship with a minor, David's legal exposure is enormous. Prosecutors could stack these charges from concealment to sexual misconduct to build pressure even if the homicide charge isn't going to stick. This case is still developing, but one thing is clear: the law doesn't punish what happened. It punishes what came before and also what came after as well. Rest in peace to Miss Celeste or Celeste Rivas Hernandez, and I will see you guys on the next update. Thank you so much for watching. My source for this information was posted by TMZ October 9, 2025 at 6:07 p.m.
Honestly, I really hope that they do wrap the case up in the sense of that they continue doing their investigation and come to a conclusion and don't just kind of drop it and let it go cold. Anyway, you guys can let me know what you think in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you to my patrons as always. I'll catch you guys next time.